Welcome back to another episode of Tales from the Trenches. We take peer group stories from our conversations with MSPs all over the place and turn them into something that's more digestible and something that you all can learn from. As always, we do not share details about our friends in the peer groups, but we do share some of the stories and things that we think are worth talking about. My name is Adam Henneman, and I will be your host today. And with me, as always, is Natalie, my awesome co-host. Natalie, this came up a lot for you recently. Tell us a little bit about what you've heard and what are some of the things that you've run into, because this is kind of a big thing, especially for the smaller MSPs out there.
Yeah, so we've had a lot of conversations in the last couple months or a few months about business continuity. And I'm not talking about backups or any of that. I'm talking about your actual business. What happens when something happens to the owner? What happens when something happens to a partnership? That type of business continuity. And that's come up quite often. And honestly, in my opinion, it is every small business owner's responsibility to have that plan just so that the aftermath is not hard on everyone.
Right. Yeah, because so much can change so quickly, right? It doesn't necessarily, it's not like, hey, I'm going to retire, a year from now. This is like I got in a car accident or got sick all of a sudden, or a family member got sick. I got to go deal with that, right?
Yeah, it's been, we've had multiple of one MSP owner picking up for another because, the other owner died. It wasn't in their, in their plan, or they've gotten hurt. Obviously, this was a big issue during COVID with everybody being sick, but it really hits that 1 to 5 person shop. And honestly, even bigger MSPs, they still need to have a plan.
Oh, for sure. And sometimes and depending on the different MSPs and different sizes of things, the plans need to be different, right? So if you think about a 2 or 3 person MSP or a solo person MSP, there's that very real like can't go on vacation level of I need a plan. But there's also you got a 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 or even larger person MSP with a single owner, or maybe a owner with a partner. If that owner all of a sudden needs to step away for whatever reason, it could be any number of reasons, or unfortunately maybe they pass away. Like what happens then, right? And this is where building the plan itself, whatever it looks like, and it's probably more detailed as you get bigger, and it's more detailed as there's more revenue, more detail as you have more employees, but having some amount of a plan is important, and it can probably start small, but it needs to grow as you grow. And this isn't something that can live in your head, right? This is a thing that you need to think about, write it down, share it with the key people in your organization, share it with your spouse, share it with your business partners, those kinds of things. Natalie, what have some of the plans that you've seen or helped talk people through? What are some of the things that have been included there?
Yeah, part of what we talk through is big picture of the company. So looking at, what's your out strategy? What do you want to do if you leave? And taking that and putting that into play. So if the plan is, hey, my kids are interested in the company and I want to leave it to my kids, in 10 years, well, how old are your kids? Well, setting that up and making sure that it is, you know, something that can be taken over. I've seen people put it in trust, put everything in a trust, uh, taking the business to account with their personal trust and then a business. I've seen people partner with other peer group members, having coverage for each other, all of those things, all of those plans. If something happens to the owner, having another peer group member come in and running it in an interim till they either sell it back to the employees or liquidate and sell, get, some type of plan that they've already put in place. But the key part that I really am passionate about is having any kind of plan whatsoever. It's your responsibility. There's nothing like your spouse who's already in a traumatic event and then they're having to worry about a business they don't really know anything about.
Right.
So you don't want to do that.
Yeah, and as it relates to some of the financial side of the world, that's absolutely something for your financial advisors and those kinds of things that
Hmm.
and or a trust advisor, like whatever that looks like from a financial piece. But yeah, your point around having it like documented and available for folks and know kind of know, people need to know where that plan is, because let's say the worst happens and the business owner passes away. you need something short term, right? You need to keep the lights on while all the other things get figured out. And if you don't have somebody who can keep the business running until whatever that next thing is figured out, and whether you have something written down or not, that's a really important piece. If you don't have a second person in charge or someone who can kind of, like I said, keep the lights on and keep the business moving for even a few weeks while things kind of get shaken out, that's one of the first things I would want to lean into, and that could easily be, leaning into the power of a peer group or leaning into the power of a peer, or if you have a business partner, maybe those are the conversations you should have. Right? If you have a Natalie, if you and I are 50-50 business partners in an MSP, if we would absolutely have to have those conversations, right? Like
Yeah.
if I die, what are you going to do? How are you going to help my spouse out? Or and then vice versa, how am I going to help your spouse out, and those kinds of things? Because if you don't have that figured out, that is a real problem. Things happen all the time, and the challenge is that when you're not ready for it, when you don't know what's coming, and you don't have it written down, that's where the problem becomes, right? If I put my tech hat back on, and if I'm going to do some server stuff in the middle of the night, and if I don't have like a backup plan, the chances of me making a good decision at 2 o'clock in the morning when things are going sideways, not super awesome. The same thing happens if something traumatic happens, or you need to go in for surgery, or you get in a car accident, or any of those things, like trying to figure that out on the fly. Yeah, the smart people can figure it out on the fly, but it's really hard work.
Well, and if you think about it in the sense of not just the owners, right? If you're in a bigger MSP, you have key people in place. They've been with the company, they hold the they have a lot of knowledge of the business and in general. It's planning if what happens if they leave as well. This isn't about, anybody can walk away from a business.
Right.
It's how do you handle that transition? What is the transition plan? So in a bigger MSP, the plans are a little bit different, but the plans still need to be there. Of what happens if my COO walks away from the company? What happens if, the director of finance leaves? How do I handle that in the interim? And that's part of your business continuity. And I'm probably going to say the word plan 15 million times in this
Yep.
podcast, but the other part that I see a lot of times from a client side is that that's something they worry about as well. What happens if I am with a small MSP and the owner dies? Or the owner gets sick, or we've talked about this in groups a lot lately where people are starting to ask, are you a one-man shop, or I lost the deal because I was a one-man shop and they didn't want to take that risk. So if you're going to sell and you're going to be that one, two, even five-person shop, you better have an answer if they're asking you that, and it can't be, I'll get back to you. You'll lose the sale.
Yeah, and this is where I think almost all roads lead back to peer groups, because in a lot of the groups that I'm talking about this kind of stuff in, the members are like, hey, you know what? If you are going to be gone for whatever reason, whether it's a vacation or whether you
Mhm.
get sick, I got your back. And it usually the one person says it, and everyone else is like, yeah, we got your back too. And you can easily kind of partner together. I guess easily is probably overstated, but you could partner together to make things better, and partner
Mhm.
together to help out your friend and MSP partner in when they need to. I have a member that travels to go see family, for a month out of the year, and so they're out of pocket out of pocket to a degree for several weeks, and for the most part they try to kind of check in on stuff. But if they need boots on the ground, they have to have some sort of a plan for how to deal with that, right? And they have to have resources to lean into, and knowing the resources that you need to backfill for, whether it's just simply
Right.
boots on the ground or run the whole damn company, those are different levels of thing, levels of need. And if I think back to at when the MSP I used to work at, and the MSP you used to work at, you or I could probably have figured it out, But
Yeah.
as good as we were at our jobs and as much as we knew about the industry, we still would have had a lot of little stumbling blocks that we wouldn't have been prepared for, because that wasn't the thing that was discussed. At least, from at least from my perspective, we were trying to figure some of those things out because the business owners, especially if you've been running the thing for a while, right? They're looking to maybe step away a little bit. Maybe they want to take some time away, and they're trying to execute on maybe their exit strategy at some
Hmm.
point. And if they aren't putting the plans together for that to happen, that leaves a big risk too, right? That the more you think about trying to exit an MSP and you want to sell it or whatever, whether you're selling it to private equity or selling it to another MSP owner or you're selling it to your staff, the more the business requires you as the owner to be like the person running the business, the less valuable your company is going to be. Now, I'm not talking like it's not going to be worth anything, but the more the business relies on you as a business owner, the more likely you're going to have to work for a while to get yourself out of that on the back end. So, if you are at all thinking about, the continuity of your overall business and trying to, level up, your business stuff, why not have an exit plan, and why not have an idea and process around getting yourself out of all of the day-to-day stuff too, because it gives you a little bit more leeway.
Yeah, and part of it for me is it's not just about, what happens if there's an emergency.
Right.
It's about thinking of your business as a whole. You're talking about what's your exit strategy? It all plays into that. What's my out? How long do I really want to work? What do I have to have in place for me not to do that? And there has to be that long-term plan and that interim emergency plan. We all know that there's no day guaranteed.
Right.
And we've both seen it in the business where one day someone's here and the next is like, man, that really kind of sucks. But that can happen to any of us. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. So it's really about, yeah, it's a little morbid. And I know a lot of people don't want to talk about it, but it's as simple as like, hey, make sure you have a will. Make sure you have your legal stuff, at least that planned out, because a lot of these businesses are intricately tied up in the owner's personal self
Right.
because they are the company. As you get bigger and obviously private equity, things of that nature, that changes the plans, right? But it's still, um, you know, do you have enough things like do you have enough payroll if something happens to pay your employees if you're gone tomorrow for at least a couple months while somebody figures it out? Is, the cash flow going to be there? Things that have to run if you're going to be able to take care of anything. And it's not like any of this just magically frees up in a week or two.
Right.
These just things that take months to happen sometimes.
Well, and don't forget the complexities of the different types of businesses too, right?
Yeah.
A LLC versus C corp and S corp, and all of the different permutations of an MSP's business structure will dictate some of the things you can and cannot do as
Yeah.
well. And the one of the things that I think if I was running an MSP today, which is kind of one of the tropes I kind of lean into, is like if I was going to do this today, what would I do and how would I think about it? And the one things that I would not want to do is like leave my wife to have to figure this stuff out, because if I was suddenly injured or died in a car accident or something like that, as morbid as it is, you want that person, your loved ones, to be able to survive as well as they can on the back end. And so there's things you need to think about there and communicate. And as much as this is like a kind of a bummer to talk about, it's a really important piece. The other thing
Mhm.
too is that if you have a business partner, right? What happens if one of the partners dies, right? Do you want to do business with your partner's spouse at that point, right? And as much as I like your husband, Natalie, I'm not sure I'd want to be a business partner with him without talking about it first, right? And same thing on the flip side, like I'm not sure you'd want to be a business partner with my wife if we were co-owners of an MSP. So
Yeah.
there's insurance policies and things that you can do to allow for that key person insurance and those kinds of pieces to go step in, and the policy can buy the other business partners controlling interest out, so that way the spouse is able to not have to worry about the business of the things, right? And out of all of the things that I've heard in not just our peer groups but other peer groups as well, is that this happens far too frequently, right? Where somebody was caught unaware, or something happened that was
Yeah.
unexpected, and then you're picking up the pieces, and you're making these, life altering decisions, without a whole lot of a net underneath you, and the plan can be a pretty solid net, as long as it's not a thing you do once and then never touch again, right? This is one of those things where you might want to talk about it every year or every couple years. When you think about, this plan, if you haven't updated whatever this is, whatever you want to call it, by the time you update your MSA, right? And you should be updating the MSA, or at least reviewing it every 3 to 5 years to make sure you're not missing something. This is the thing that you want to update. And if you're not keeping this, your kind of your succession plan figured out, and what that's going to look like, and tweak it and adjust it, and modify it as needed, then you are potentially leaving your business at risk.
Yeah, I think that it's just something that, when you have your yearly 2-day meeting, this is something that gets evaluated on a regular basis because things change, laws change, friendships change. If you have a friend that was going to do it and then, checking in with them, hey, is this still something you're even capable of doing? What happens if that other person that was in your plan is getting out of the business in general and you don't go back and reevaluate yours? So it is something that every year you just go back and check in and make sure, like, hey, is this still a good contingency? Is this good succession plan? Maybe you grew a lot and now you've rethought, like, no, really, I kind of want to sell it back to the employees. Like, they've put a lot of work in. I want to reward them. So it's definitely not a one and done and set it to the side. It's 100% something that has to be evaluated every year, or
Yeah,
at least every two.
I 100% agree. And the other thing too is, especially if you've been running your business for a while, and you're making north of $1 million in revenue, and maybe a couple $1 million in revenue, this is one of those things too where you might want to have a business valuation done at
Hmm.
least every other year, or maybe even more frequently than that, depending on what's going on. Even if you're a few years out from your exit, or maybe you're a whole lot of years out from your exit, understanding what your business is worth and some of the things that you could do to make it worth more are also good things to think about. And this all ties together, right? The whole point of all
Yep.
this is to have an idea about, like, the important components of your business, and make sure that you're focusing on the right things, right? And it's more than just this planning for whatever the succession looks like, right? And we have a whole coaching offering around it too. We have the whole
Yeah.
BCC offering, which is all about determining where you want to be at some point in the future, and then, like, plotting a course to get there, right? Literally a plan to get there. This would be part of that too, right? Just having a in case of emergency break glass kind of a thing.
And it's also one of the reasons in peer groups and things of that nature that we harp on your business, like, just even a yearly, or looking out at 1, 3, and 5 years, like, where do you want to be? Because we have a lot of owners that are, hey, they want to retire in 5 years. Great. What does that look like? What does that look like for you? Can you even feasibly retire in 5 years? If you have never looked at the actual data that goes with it, the numbers, can you actually sell your company? You can have everything on paper, but if you've never put the work in to look at the actual things that go with that, mm, that's not much of a plan.
Right.
James always tells me hope is not a plan.
Right.
And so you have to really kind of make sure that you have your ducks in a row. And like you said, Adam, this is something that you want to talk about with your financial planners, your lawyer, things of that nature, like, what are the actual steps? But it is something that has to be done.
Yep. you know let's talk a little bit about the vacation aspect. Let's flip this to the kind of the happy part,
Yep.
right? So, because we talk to MSPs all the time where they haven't taken a vacation in, I don't know, a decade, right? Or at least multiple years, right? And so let's talk about, you're a smaller MSP, right? You're less than 5 people. Maybe you're just one person. Doesn't really matter. What would some of the things be if you were going to take a vacation that you'd want to check the box off to make sure that you aren't like you don't get to your destination and all of a sudden you're dealing with an outage, or clients calling you.
Yeah, one of the things that I always talk about is a plan in advance. Make sure that your projects are all either shored up or you're not going to be all of a sudden doing a cutover. Like if you're running behind, let's keep that communication with
Yep.
your customers. And the other thing is there's multiple resources out there for you. So if you need boots on the ground and you're on vacation, you can use something like Field Nation where you hire somebody to go out there. The other thing is the beauty of peer groups again, is that hey, I'm going to go on vacation. If my tier 1 or my tier 2 is having a problem, can they call you for advice? Can they ask you for technical help?
Yep.
Things like that. And partnering with another, it doesn't have to be somebody in peer groups, but even another non-competitive person in your area and doing an agreement so that they're not stealing clients from you, but you're partnering with them to be boots on the ground. It's kind of like when you talk about staff augmentation and in other aspects of the MSP, who's going to be your resource? And there's plenty of resources in the channel for MSPs to reach out to.
Yeah, I think knowing your competition is not a bad thing, and not just knowing who they are, but knowing like really who they are, and being friendly with them is not a bad thing. Now, I'm sure there are people in your market that you don't like very much. That's fine. Like I'm not saying that like no one like everybody, but when I was running my break fix shop way back in the day, I knew a number of local folks that I could lean into if I needed to. And a couple of them are still doing business today. I also, when I was here, in running, kind of working on the larger MSP, I knew who all the local competitors were. I was
Hmm.
relatively close with two or three of them because the long and the short of it was it's just good to know who else is out there. And maybe that you don't want to partner with company X, and that's fine. But there's some people that are pretty respectable in every market. In the
Yeah.
larger market you're in, the more likely you are to find someone who's not going to go out there and steal your business. And to your point, now you just have an agreement that a
Yeah.
written contract that says you're not going to solicit each other's clients that you are directly doing work with, and you can make that be pretty straightforward. And again, the larger the market you are, the less likely that's going to become a thing anyway.
Well,
The two my former company was actually two companies that bumped into each other, and they started talking to each other. When one client was leaving to go to the other one, that's how they became business partners. Like getting to know some other people in your market's not a bad idea.
yeah, and it's not just vacation. It's what happens when you want to go to a conference and do continuing education. What happens when you need to step away for personal matter for a day? And burnout is real in this industry.
Hmm.
Let's be honest. Burnout as a small business owner is real. And then you add on the technical and you have to keep your clients up and running. And could be an emergent situation at 2 o'clock in the morning on any given night. This this is a burnout centric field.
Yep.
So having just anything, we tell people in peer groups all the time, start with an hour. Just block an hour and then see what happens. And I never say what could go wrong because Murphy's Law, everything will go wrong in that hour. But there's very few things short of a fully down that they can't wait an hour.
Right.
You know, so you're planning. If you can't make your plan all at one big time, make baby steps. Hey, I just want to take a half an afternoon off. How do I handle that?
Yep.
Okay, now I just want a Friday off. I want a long weekend before Labor Day. How do you handle that? And just baby step that up into a real plan.
Yeah, the other thing too is this is where having key people that work for you,
Mhm.
offloading some of the stuff that relies on just you to do is really important. And I was talking to an MSP right before coming on our podcast today around, they're just trying to get an admin person to help them out with some stuff, and they were struggling with that. And I said, well, think of all the stuff that you do on a regular basis, the things that are repetitive, and teach them how to do those things, right? And if I think of like you're just trying to offload some of those tasks
Yeah.
to free you up to do other things, right? It's the evolution of the owner's role. And I had recorded a video about this a little while back, but the idea is that as you grow your business and as you mature your business, you step more and more out of the day to day of things, which solves a lot of these other issues. Now that it doesn't solve them all, but it makes a lot of these things a whole lot more palatable, right? I think about MSP business owner that starts their business when they're, you know, late teens, early 20s, and they've been doing it for 15, 20 years. And they're like, man, I'm tired of doing all this stuff right now. I could really use a break. Well, if you haven't found someone who to can kind of take the reins and
Yeah.
help out and like kind of be able to kind of keep your business floating while you take some time off, that's on you. Like you've been doing this long enough where you probably should figure that out. And kudos to you that are doing that and have started to figure that out. And you find your second and third in command, and empower them to learn and get better at all this stuff. That's how you and I grew our careers. Is
Yeah.
we were empowered to learn and to grow and to figure some of the stuff out and make some mistakes along the way. But ultimately, the goal for at least for me, and I think it was for you as well, was to be able to kind of help run the business for real while the owner steps away to go do other things, right? As business owners, oftentimes they're super entrepreneurial and they have a million other ideas, and maybe they want to go start some other business. Well, if you are able to competently run the thing while they step away, to go focus on something else, whether it's something fun or something not fun, at least at least they've got someone there to kind of run the thing.
Yeah, I would say ultimately it's about knowing your resources, knowing who steps in when. If you're a one-man shop, at least communicating, have an answer for your clients. And ultimately, it's got to be written down.
Yep.
It cannot be something that lives in your head. What happens if something happens to that? I mean, right now, it's small business, it's owner centric. You have to get it out of that as you grow. And even as you grow, at 4 million, 7 million, you still have to have a plan.
Yep.
This does not go away with size.
It gets more complex with
This
size.
It just gets more complex. So starting out small, or starting out when you're smaller, or at least starting out with some sort of plan is just key at this point.
Yeah. It's with stuff we talk about all the time, right? It's
Yep.
when you're a small MSP, at least having some version of the process written down. No matter what the process is, gives you a starting point to iterate on and make it better as you grow and you get bigger and as you need that plan whatever it is to be more complex.
Yep.
And this is a thing to start with as early as you can. Maybe not on day one of your MSP, but certainly by the end of year one, you're probably thinking about, okay, well, what happens if this happens, or what happens when I want to take a vacation, or what happens when kid's sick, or like whatever, right? You insert thing here. Yeah, think about that early and keep working on it and make a deliberate effort, right? It's all about being deliberate in our world. So, Natalie, in addition to all the peer group stuff that we've talked about already, what other resources do we have in Academy that might be able to be leaned into for this?
Well, we definitely have some on-demand content regarding just business planning in general, simple business plan, just looking at your 1, 3, and 5-year outlook. As you said, we have the VCC coaching and PAX 8 that really sets you up for success for what is your plan, your out plan, and how do you get there.
Yep.
And then obviously the peer group side of that. And then we will, of course, is currently in the works right now on this very subject for instructor-led training. That will be out at the beginning of next year, which is really only 4 months away. So we're really focusing on that as far as the PAX 8 side to make sure that everybody has resources they can look at and reach out to.
Absolutely. And as we work on more stuff, and because it's stuff that you and I work on a pretty regular basis, I've put on webinars and stuff in the past about business
Mhm.
planning and some of those kind of things, because a lot of this stuff is kind of like builds into all the stuff we've been talking about. As we have some more of these things, follow this channel, subscribe to the podcast,
Yeah.
subscribe to the channel on YouTube and all the things, so that way when we do have things to talk about and things to share with you all, that you all can get access to them. So with all of that, thanks for hanging out with us today, and we'll see you next week.